Well, to look at the issue of the government's plans and progress on the promise to legalize and regulate marijuana, I'm joined now in the studio by the government's point man on the issue, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Scarborough Liberal MP Bill Blair. Mr. Blair, thanks for coming in.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, we have to start with one clarification, and that is we've been talking about the government's promise. The promise is usually couched in terms of July 1st. What is the date for your promise for legalization for marijuana?
Let me provide real clarity. It will not be July 1st. That's Canada Day. And we will keep and maintain Canada Day as the day in which we celebrate the nation's birth. But our government has been very clear that it is our intent to begin the process of implementation and legalization in July of 2018. I don't have a precise date, and frankly, that precise date will come after the important work that the Senate is going to do, and also in consideration in all the work that needs to be done after the Senate has completed its job. So in July? Well, our target is July of 2018, and we're working hard on that date, and frankly, I've been very grateful that in our relationships and work with our provincial and territorial partners over the past 2 years, our senior officials have been working towards implementation in July of 2018. Everybody's rolled up their sleeve. The provinces have brought forward their regulatory frameworks. You know, the work has been moving apace towards that date.
Is there wiggle room, though? I mean, for example, if you have a blockage in the Senate that doesn't allow you to get to regulations and things like that, could we be looking into August? I mean, obviously, I'm just trying to say this was always couched as a deadline.
Yeah, and I'm a little reluctant to speculate on hypotheticals. Both that bill, Bill C-45, is now in the hands of the Senate, and they've got some really important work to do, and I have great confidence and optimism about the quality of work and the reflection that they'll bring to it. And when they've completed their work, we still have a little more work to do in finalizing the arrangements and regulations for implementation, but we're all committed and ready to continue to work apace, aiming towards the implementation. And I want to be really clear, implementation should not be thought of as the event of a single date, but a process. A process that has already begun in the development of legislation and regulations, but a process that will take a major step forward, ideally in July of 2018, as we lift the criminal prohibition and begin to roll out a system of regulated production and distribution.
Okay, last thing on the timing, but as you know, the Senate is no longer the supine, docile Senate it used to be. It's a lot less controllable. There's a lot of independent thought and independent voting going on there. If you should receive the bill back with some major changes, like with regards to, I don't know, edibles, or with regards to testing, there are two bills. If they came back with significant changes proposed, could we see a summer of toing and froing?
I can tell you I have a great respect for the important work that the Senate's going to do, and I would not speculate on hypothetical changes that they might propose, but I very much value their work and the advice that they will give to the government, and so we take that very seriously, and we're going to work very collaboratively with them to assist in every way possible to help them do the important work that they have to do, and we'll deal with the outcome of that work as it comes.
The bill then passes, you get regulations through, it becomes a new regime.
Yes.
The big concern is impaired driving, drug-impaired driving. Yeah. You have the bill that specifically addresses that. One of the concerns is the relative lack of federally accepted technology. You have a pilot program going on, I believe, in New Brunswick about the fluid testing, saliva and blood testing. What is the status? A lot of people are very concerned that right now you depend on...
I have what I believe is very good news in this regard. First of all, these devices have been used, oral fluids test kits have been in use in various countries around the world, 18 different European countries, Australia, New Zealand, very effectively for several years. Okay. We rely on the scientific advice of the Canadian Society of Forensic Scientists, Drugs and Driving Committee, and we've asked them to do a review of the technology, make recommendations to the government with respect to the establishment of standards for the approval of devices that would be used in Canada. We also conducted a pilot project, I think that's what you referred, in 8 different jurisdictions across the country, because one of the things we wanted to be certain of is that this technology would work in Canadian conditions, the cold winter months. And that pilot was done, and it proved very effective. We now have a report from the Canadian Society of Forensic Sciences Drugs and Driving Committee that establishes recommendations for standards, that those standards are now with the Minister of the Attorney General, and she's examining those standards and will be acting on the advice that we've received. I'm very confident that there is now a clear path forward for the approval of oral fluids testing devices.
This is saliva testing.
It's saliva testing that will be available to the police in order to begin the important job of detecting impaired driving. And I will also, just to clarify, this is not a problem created by new legislative approach or new ways of controlling cannabis. It's a problem that exists today. But the great challenge that exists today is the police do not possess the training, the resources, or the technology to detect and prosecute the serious threat to public safety on our roadways. We're changing that through Bill C-46 and some very important investments that we've announced. $161 million for the training and equipping of officers as drug recognition experts and standardized field sobriety testing, and to make accessible these new technologies. All of those things, the police have been asking for that for a decade, and we are delivering.
Are they at a point, okay, well, that's another point. Are they at a point where they're feeling comfortable? Because the last thing most Canadians saw was police chiefs saying, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, and we don't have the time. We won't have the resources, for example, to have those drug recognition experts in every jurisdiction. Do they have the resources?
Well, I'd like to let them speak for themselves. And the current president of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, Chief Mario Harrell, came before the Justice Committee on September the 20th. He commended the government for the strong new legislations, said it is exactly what they've been asking for. He acknowledged the funding commitments, and he expressed his confidence that this was going to make the difference. It was what they had been asking for, and his last remarks is, it's clear the government's been listening. And frankly, I've been part of those conversations. We were listening.
Public education. You announced a small amount, I mean $46 million over 5 years, but is it going to take more than that to really give people an idea of how to deal with marijuana properly, how to deal with it when driving or not driving in the workplace? I mean, there's a lot of aspects to this. And children.
First of all, there's two groups of money. The $46 million is around the public health aspects and training. And we've said $46 million for over 5 years, but that's all front-end loaded because we also recognize that as revenue is generated from this new market, we've made a commitment that some of that revenue will be reinvested in public education, research, treatment, and rehabilitation to continue to help us achieve our public purpose aims of reducing the social and health harms of cannabis use. There's also money that's recently been invested and is being spent on developing public education campaigns around impaired driving. And one of the things that we found is that many people in this country, particularly young people, had no idea and were badly misinformed about the impact that using cannabis can have on their ability to drive. And so we've got what I think is a very effective and robust public education campaign already underway to inform people of the risks. And you'll see it on television almost every night. That information is getting out there, and in the next month or so, in the coming 2 months, the beginning of a very robust public education campaign around the health risks around cannabis will also begin. It's really important that people understand the risk, particularly to young people, that this drug can represent. We've seen how effective that can be with tobacco control. When we gave people accurate information in a credible format, they made better decisions, and we're going to do that with cannabis as well. Statistics
Canada just released figures this week saying that Canadians spent $5.7 billion on cannabis. And this is while it's illegal, so they're admitting to $5.7 billion worth of purchase of cannabis already last year. How much? Because the goal of your legislation is to take this cannabis consumption out of the black market, the illicit market, to make it legal so you can control it. How are you going to deal with that when you have Ontario, for example, with 44 stores for 13 million people and a 24-hour drive across the province? How's that going to even make a dent?
Well, first of all, let me be really clear. It is not the government of Canada's intention to promote the use of this drug. What we're trying to do is reduce its social and health harms. And we believe that the best way to do that is to lift the prohibition and replace a failing system of cannabis control with a far more comprehensive, far more effective system of production and distribution.
Right, but it doesn't work if no one's buying it.
And we've been working very closely and respectfully with the provinces and territories in developing their legislative frameworks for their distribution environments. We've asked the provinces to begin cautiously, prudently, and not, to move forward recklessly on this thing. And I've been really pleased and impressed, quite frankly. The provinces have been very cautious in their approach, and I think that's reflected in Ontario. Ontario has said that they're going to have both an online delivery system, and that is the new retail environment for most Canadians, and they're going to have as many as 14 retail stores, which I believe is an appropriately cautious but careful start. And this is how we will begin the market, and then decisions can be made as we get a better understanding. And people say, well, can you displace the criminal market overnight? And the answer is simply, of course not. That's been well established for decades in this country. But all of the penalties and law enforcement authorities that currently exist to deal with organized crime are retained. But we're putting a market in place to take away and compete with that criminal enterprise and giving Canadians a regulated choice, a safer choice, a more socially responsible choice.
I guess the other question that we're asking here on CPAC on this 5-part series, and that is you're coming up to 2 years, less than 2 years to the next election, and this is the big 5, and these are priorities, and these are promises. You must be asking yourself, in less than 2 years' time, when Canadians go to vote again, are they going to be satisfied with the regime they see in 2 years' time? Is it going to be up and running? Is it going to be working? Or is it going to be, I don't know, is it going to be still really a work in progress that's still limping along?
Let's be really clear what we promised. We promised we were going to do a better job of protecting our kids. I'm absolutely confident a new system of well-regulated, strictly regulated production and distribution and consumption regs are going to give us the opportunity to do a better job of protecting our kids. We promised we were going to take the profits away from organized crime, and I'm also equally confident that this approach is the right approach. I think what Canadians will see, that we've taken a careful, evidence-based, cautious approach to bringing in a new system of strict regulation, exactly as we promised, comprehensive regulation, to properly control production and distribution, which right now is entirely in the hands of criminals. And we're going to take that away from them and create a safer, healthier, and more socially responsible environment for Canadians. That's the promise we made. That's the promise we're keeping.
Okay, on this, at this point, at this juncture, I want to thank you very much for coming in at this juncture, because something tells me we will be speaking about this many times over the next few months to come, but thanks for coming in.
It's my pleasure.